I think before Trump became president, we saw it from readers, we saw it from people who were Trump supporters that said it's not going to be this bad. Stop fear mongering. Like, this is not what's going to happen. We don't believe that he's going to do all this stuff. Well, a lot of these things are happening, right? And a Democrat was telling me, you want alligators with lasers on their heads. Like at this point, Democrats are sort of giving up on the enforcement piece, which again only has Republicans licking their lips, saying, how much further can we go?
All right, and we're back with the newest Bulwarker. He's the author of our new newsletter, Huddled Masses, which is going to be covering the Trump deportation regime or whatever emerges from that. He's reported on politics and Latino issues for over a decade, including at Rolling Stone, Vanity Fair, Politico, and The Guardian. It's Adrian Carrasquillo. Welcome to the pod, man.
Tim, thanks so much for having me.
I was ranting with Sarah and JVL on The Next Level yesterday about how, sometimes in our biz, in the political commentary biz, there is a tendency to, after you learn what happened about something, the next question is will this matter? Will people care about this? Yeah. And I am going to try very hard to resist that temptation, at least over the next year, because who the fuck knows is partly the answer. And there's not another election for, 22 months. I mean, not another broad national election. And so, immigration is one example of this, where I think that people are going to fall into a trap of, well, Donald Trump had a mandate on immigration and people like this, so whatever, and I think that is just totally the wrong way to look at this. And the implications of what happens in this area, I think, are about as great as in anywhere besides maybe the federal government stuff we just talked about with Sam. But I don't know. So I want to go with you. I want to break through all of the executive orders one at a time with you. But at the broadest picture, what is your sense for, kind of the mood about how much of this is saber rattling, how much is going to be real, and the extent of the impact?
I think that we wrote even before Trump became president that there were multiple parts here. There is a PR campaign. There is we're putting a new coat of paint on the deportations that were happening before. ICE released a report in the end of December at Joe Biden's last, ICE report, basically. They got 81,000 criminals last year. So the United States was already getting criminals. You get to put a new coat of paint. You get to have the bully pulpit, and you get to say, oh, my God, look, Tom Homan saying we're getting so many criminals. So that's one part. These executive orders that we're going to talk about, they really do look to transform immigration in America, to the extent that Trump can do it. Yes, laws need to be passed by Congress, but the first Trump administration already sort of took a hatchet to the trunk of legal immigration, asylum, and things like that. So now they are just continuing, and now they understand the levers of government better. So this really is an assault on the immigration system. They are breaking down a lot of pieces of it, which we'll get into at the border. And so, no, it really is a new day, and they have put in a lot of things that are going to cause strife, not just for people who are more recent people who've come here, but, there's directives that they can now go into schools and hospitals and churches. So this is going to be a very challenging, and it's going to be very difficult for a lot of people.
All right, let's talk through the EOs. I think the one that we've gotten to since Monday on this pod is the birthright citizenship executive order, which is just preposterous on its face. I did a reading of the 14th Amendment, I believe, on Tuesday's pod. It's about as clear as you can get. As far as this is something you want changed, you're going to have to change the Constitution. We'll see if our wise and noble Supreme Court agrees with the plain letter of the law, I guess, over the next couple of months. But outside of birthright citizenship, let's tick through what some of the other EOs have been.
Yeah, so he declared a national emergency at the border, which unlocks for him the ability to bring troops. He says the Secretary of Defense is going to send troops. So already it's 1,500 troops that are headed to the border. With the likelihood that they could go up as high as 10,000 troops, we could break that down if you wanted to. The fact that 3 days ago, the New York Times had a story about how basically the border was quiet at the end of Biden's term. But they've declared an invasion, and they say that we're sending troops to the border, so we're sending troops to the border. Part of that is the military sealing the border and putting more barriers around the border. So that's the first couple.
What is on the emergency side?
Yep.
What was the pretense for the emergency? Because he did this the last term, but the pretense was COVID, and COVID is. Yeah,
you're right. You're right, and you bring up a great point, which is that in the past they were using pretenses. There's this disease, so no one can come. It's just explicit now. He's calling it an invasion. This is the same language that Greg Abbott and Ken Paxton used in Texas, which a lot of people felt inspired the shooter in El Paso at the Walmart, who said, there's an invasion, so I'm driving 10 hours to kill Mexicans and Latinos. I mean, so it's fully U.S. policy that there's an invasion at the border right now, and that's where the national emergency comes in.
So what do the groups you talk to on this one, I mean, is there legal vulnerability here? Or is there a sense that like the president has a wide berth to kind of declare emergencies at their whim?
Yeah, look, I mean, I think from the national emergency, the invasion and what that could unlock legally, to things like, which we'll get into, using the Alien Enemies Act to go after to go after cartels and gangs that he is now designated terrorist organizations. These are laws that have been on the books. The Alien Enemies Act has been on the books since 1798. Which says that like another country is doing an armed invasion of our country. And so, yeah, there's concerns that U.S. citizens could get caught up if you're Venezuelan and, the gang that they're going after is Venezuelan. So, yeah, there are so many of those concerns. I think the groups, when I first talked to them, were sort of shell shocked. They knew this was coming, but you're like sifting through even the legal groups and then are trying to figure out which they're going to go after first.
So, all right. So the emergency at the border, birthright citizenship. What else?
Yeah. One of them is just the military, like sealing the borders and putting up barriers and things like that. Designating criminal cartels as global terrorists. That's part of it. They're also suspending refugee settlement for 4 months. This is until such time as further entry of refugees aligns with the interests of the United States. So that doesn't look like that's going to come back anytime soon. I know they were canceling flights of people from Afghanistan, 1,660 people from Afghanistan. Their flights were cleared. They were on the way. As people say, no one gets more vetting than refugees. It can sometimes take years, and he's just sort of unilaterally canceling these flights. Those are a couple of the other ones.
Yeah, that's just the Afghan refugee thing is so sick. And imagine being one of these people, like the work to get out of the country, the horror there, to go to another country, to be waiting to come, to have your flight ready. It's just like, it's a total nightmare. Is your sense on the refugee things that they're going to reduce that number to zero refugees?
I think that's the sense. They said that they want to revisit that in 90 days and see if it's in the best interest of the U.S. And that just seems like they're clearly going to say that it's not in the best interest of the U.S.
Yeah, great. Huddled Mass is a good name for the newsletter. You can see it's kind of right on the nose there. What about in the interior? Has there been any? Did any of the EOs affect, like people that are here on visas or anything such as that?
Some of the people who were here legally, they are causing sort of headaches for them. One of the things that I found really interesting was on. I don't know if you know about the CBP1 app. Was this app that people always talk about law and order and coming into the border orderly in an orderly fashion, and that's something that the Biden administration created, where they said we're going to have this app. You sign up. If you come in without using this app, you're done. You're gone. But if you use this app, you can sign up for an appointment. And this great Washington Post reporter, Adelis Hernandez, she had video of migrants crying because their appointments were being canceled. And so this is a piece where people say, wait, you're the law and order president. And this app people say, get in line and do it the right way. And this was people getting in line and doing it the right way. So this is where I say it's sort of an assault from all these different parts because there's so many pieces here when it comes to the orders.
Yeah, that video was actually what I was referencing at the top when I was talking about on the next level. Something I was like, I don't know if this will matter to swing voters in the midterms, and I don't really care. Like it was a horrific just a human anecdote. We'll put the link in the show notes if people missed it, of just somebody that had waited, had decided that they're going to go do this the right way. They were 3 hours away from their appointment. They shut down the app. And just totally brutal. I want to talk about one other thing before we get into kind of what's next and implications. In addition to the executive orders, we had the Laken Riley Act. Laken Riley was the young woman that was killed by an undocumented immigrant. That became kind of a flashpoint during the campaign. And a lot of Democrats worked with Republicans on this, in part, I think, because on the face of it, it was kind of pitched in a sort of common sense way, which is like criminal, illegal migrants, should be punished or deported or what, it was just like if you commit a crime, in addition to being in the country illegally, that person should not be given leniency. But the act had a bunch of other stuff in it, as is often the case. They stuffed these things through. One of the unintended consequences I saw was that it was like this litigiousness, like it makes it easier to sue on immigration grounds if you're in the states. And Steve Bannon was pushing now red state governors are going to be able to sue the feds if they feel like they're being forced to take H-1B visas or immigrants that are here in various legal ways. So talk to us about what exactly the elements are of that bill and what the implications might be.
So fascinating, because I think there was something about doing it at the beginning of the year where it did seem a little bit like the groups in the advocacy world were caught a little flat-footed. There's been a lot of reporting. People felt that, maybe some of the Democrats hadn't read the bill. I mean, to your point, state attorney generals can sue if they feel that the federal government's not doing something abiding correctly on immigration. Federal government is the one that runs immigration. So now you're empowering the Ken Paxtons of the world to find issue with anything and to launch all these lawsuits. On top of that, I think that there is so much in the political space. You mentioned the word criminal, and people say, oh, no, absolutely, criminals should be out, Americans and politicians. But this is as simple as somebody shoplifting now can be detained, can have their due process rights taken away. And so ICE has already said this is going to cost billions, and they're focused on criminals. And now they're going to get shoplifters, or they're going to get people with non-violent, smaller crimes. So, it's not surprising that Republicans push this. It is more surprising that a lot of Democrats went along with it, and that there's parts in there that really seem to be sort of undercovered and emerged after advocacy and everyone stepped up and said, wait, what are you doing? How are you voting for this?
Yeah. You mentioned that Ken Paxton, the Attorney General in Texas, the ability to sue the feds. One thing I think a lot of commentators are missing about what is coming in the immigration regime is that it is going to push a lot of power down to states and jurisdictions to be able to and let them loose to do enforcement as aggressively as they want, right? And I think that while it might be the strategic idea of the Trump poobahs, that we're going to do raids in Chicago and in blue states to make blue, governing blue politicians look bad. All these red state governors and constitutional sheriffs and attorney generals are going to feel political pressure to butch up and demonstrate that they're tough on illegal immigration too, and that they're going to have crackdowns in their states. And I think about that in Louisiana. I think that that there's going to be a lot of issues happening in local jurisdictions that people haven't really kind of wrapped their head around yet. I don't know what you think about that.
I think before Trump became president, we saw it from readers. We saw it from people who were Trump supporters that said, it's not going to be this bad. Stop fear mongering. This is not what's going to happen. We don't believe that he's going to do all this stuff. Well, a lot of these things are happening, right? And, in December, for example, a Missouri legislator said, let's do $1,000 bounties on undocumented immigrants. You turn in immigrants, you get $1,000 each, And so people hear that and they're like, oh, come on, that's not going to pass. This is crazy. To your point, Democrats have really lost the enforcement battle. Like that's a little preview of my next newsletter. So, a Democrat was telling me, you want alligators with lasers on their heads. Like at this point, Democrats are sort of giving up on the enforcement piece, which again only has Republicans licking their lips saying, how much further can we go in these states? And so, yeah, it's going to be, I don't think people are prepared for what exactly is going to happen here.
All right, let's just end with that. Let's talk about your next newsletter. The Democrats do have to be strategic here, right? I don't have to be strategic on this podcast. I can talk about whatever the fuck I want. But the Democrats have to be kind of like pick their battles. Like what is winnable? What is going to be politically salient? What doesn't make them look like they're on the side of violent criminal migrants or whatever? And if you're saying that they're kind of just going to let the Republicans have what they want as far as border enforcement is concerned, where are they starting to look to actually try to pick fights and limit the scope of this?
A source yesterday was telling me that, the law and order piece is an area where they can say like, wait, Trump said he was going to come in and bring law and order. He's canceling things like the CBP One app that actually brings some order to this process. What's going on with birthright citizenship is very much an area that is fertile ground for Democrats, where you can say, this is not right. This is in the U.S. Constitution. The executive can't edit the Constitution like it's a Wikipedia page. This is not happening. So that's, those are some areas where they can fight back. I was thinking of this frame of sort of like where enforcement, they're giving up so much on enforcement. It's like, yeah, you can have a border wall, but leave immigrants in the interior the fuck alone, and I think that there's going to be fights on, you're trying to tear apart families. You're trying to go after small businesses. ICE used to, there used to be immigrants who would be able to claim, let's say, sanctuary in a church, right? And why are they able to do that? ICE is not going to a church to drag you out. Well, now there was a directive literally under the cover of night the other day that DHS is now, there's a memo where basically you can go into churches, you can go into hospitals, you can go into schools, and they told ICE to use common sense. So, I had a great legal source telling me that ICE offices are like police precincts. They're very individual. They very kind of do their own thing. And so they very famously don't listen to memos and directives, by the way. So this is one where now they can just do what they want. And if somebody maybe heads into a church, maybe they can go in and drag them out, right? There's a lot of fear around schools and things like that. So I think that's the slippery slope for Republicans in the Trump administration. Are you doing things like this, which I think will play into the Democrats' hands? You're right. They can't oppose Trump on everything. But this is an area that I think it could be problematic for Republicans.
Yeah, well, the Christian Party. It's like, hey, we're going to start going into churches to deport people. It's just kind of, that is right out of the New Testament. If you just sort of read read between the lines, is exactly what Jesus was advocating for. Adrian, I do want to... one last thing on enforcement, and this is going to be me editorializing. I'm wondering if you have any reporting on this from what happens on the Hill. I'm worried a little bit, to your point, that the Democrats, in their rush to want to seem tough on border security and to concede to Republicans on border security, that they are going to bail Republicans out of a couple of budget pickles, because they don't want to be seen as blocking immigration enforcement. And you can already see this on the Hill. There's some conversations happening where Republicans might want to cut a deal where they can like increase the debt limit and keep the government open in exchange for, border security. And I just think it would be a massive mistake for the Democrats to go along with that. And I'm worried that they are. So I don't know if you've had any conversations with folks on the Hill or advocacy groups and how they're kind of thinking about the coming budget fight.
It's a great question, because I did see that reporting yesterday as well, that they're considering some like huge, deal on all these fronts. I did talk to a senior Democrat yesterday, though, who said, we're not going to be bailing them out anymore. If Republicans can't govern, then Democrats shouldn't come in to help them out with all the problems that they're having with their own side. So I do think that that's one piece that's interesting and something to watch. I don't know for sure. I know people are talking about this big deal, but there's definitely Democrats who don't want to do that.
All right. Thanks so much, newest Bulwarker. Excited to have you on board. Adrian Carrasquillo, we'll continue to be talking, unfortunately, because I think there'll be a lot of news on this front. So look forward to having you back soon. And we'll be back tomorrow for another edition of the Bulwark Podcast with our buddy David French. We'll see you all then. Peace.